So I want to talk to you about wellness, women, and really the religion of pseudoscience and how all that really combines in a very predatory way to have a significant impact on many people's lives. And whether it's in the office or, what your physician may end up thinking, or how it leads maybe your congressperson to change laws that allow us to have chiropractors that get to, define their own practice. And I was thrilled to hear that I shouldn't have spent 5 years becoming an OBGYN in Canada and then doing a year of fellowship, that I could have just done a weekend course to be a specialist. Wow, isn't that awesome? So I think it's super important that so many people don't understand the facts behind so many of the things that we do in medicine, and that's really part of one of my missions. So when I was, talking a little bit about actually getting into a Twitter fight like I normally do, because that's my brand of wellness, someone sent me this image, which I thought was a really great way to start the day. It looks like you're writing about a science topic you don't understand. I know, right? I just thought, people are so creative anyway, so I need someone to animate that for me. I'm sure someone here could do that. Okay, so I want to talk about wellness and how the World Health Organization defines it, first of all, because we should sort of start with, what is really the factual way to define it. So it's an optimal state of health of individuals or groups, and it includes, living to the fullest potential physically, emotionally, socially, spiritually, and economically, and fulfillment of expectations with family and work and social groups. And it's a pretty broad thing, but I sort of thought, well, what does that really mean? And I kind of summarized that in my head as, wellness is kind of living your best life, I suppose, meaning being as healthy as possible. And science can help a little bit with that, right? Like, we can tell you about getting your blood pressure checked and getting your cervical cancer screening and getting your colon cancer screening, or, getting whatever kind of health screening, get treatment. So, we can help with that in medicine. We can tell you to go for walks. We can tell you to have some fellowship, and being as happy as possible, and understanding that what makes every person in this room happy is going to be different. I seriously am happy when I'm battling trolls on Twitter, and other people find that incredibly stressful, and that's okay. We all have different things that are kind of our jam, So, I think about, what makes me happy. But, the thing about wellness is that it has sort of expanded in a lot of different ways. But getting back to this living your best life, where have I heard that before? Well, I've heard that from Oprah. Is Oprah right? Is it really like living your best life? Are you ready to live your best life? Sign up here. And boy, look at that imagery and how lovely it is. And I mean, well, who wouldn't want to live like Oprah, right? Like, I don't know, she owns like half of Maui and, gets to pal around with Deepak Chopra. Well, actually, that's probably like not a plus, but that would be like anti-wellness for me. And so if you go to Oprah's site, like right after so if you Google wellness on the O site, you get to, some pretty benign things, actually. I mean, like, festive Christmas candles. Okay, if that's your jam, maybe that's going to make your life a little bit easier without having to sort of go to Pottery Barn or whatever to figure out what scent you want to have. I don't know why I finally forgave my father's mistress. That would actually aggravate me, but that would, goes along with how wellness is definitely personal for different people. Wellness seems pretty seasonal here, which, whatever. So, it's pretty benign. But the thing is, this isn't really what modern wellness is. To me, this is like arts and crafts and human interest stories. And this might be sort of the very surface of wellness, and is clearly very geared to a female audience. But, the wellness that we're talking about, sort of modern wellness, is supplements and special diets and things that have been monetized. Because let me tell you, as a physician, I try to practice wellness in the World Health Organization sense. And whenever I give interviews on wellness, it's very fascinating. All the reporters want to know, like, what I do. And I'm like, well, I don't buy any of that stuff. I exercise, I hang out with my kids, I try to limit my screen time, I You probably don't believe that if you see my Twitter feed. I try to go to sleep. I try to do these things, and none of those things can be monetized. I mean, none of them really require anything except, I bought like a Peloton so I could, exercise at a more convenient time, but that's about it. So that there isn't much that you really need to spend to engage in wellness unless you're talking about your hobbies or whatever. So before we get into what wellness is, I think it's very important to understand how people get to wellness. Because if you don't understand why someone goes somewhere, you can't actually then offer them a messaging that might speak to them so they could look at what you're offering. And there are huge gaps in medicine, and I am the first person to sort of acknowledge that. In fact, the gaps in medicine, which I experienced during my pregnancy 16 years ago, sort of set me on this path of trying to build a better medical internet for people. So we know, especially for women, the gaps in medicine are bigger. We know that women have largely been excluded from medicine until really late into the 1900s. Even if historically, if you go back to the time of Hippocrates and the early sort of dissection of cadavers, they didn't even dissect female cadavers because that was dirty and shameful. You couldn't look at a naked body. So all of the information about female anatomy was sort of made up and written in a textbook, and that's why they thought like the uterus used to detach and wander the body. Like they really believed that. And if it wandered too high, you would get sluggish. It's like, oh man, I'm so tired. My uterus must be in my throat. And if it went down too low, then of course you were going to die. I'm like, oh my God, my uterus is going to be at my knees soon. This is it. I'm done. So it obviously sounds fantastical to us, but if no one's actually ever opened up a human body and looked at what a woman looked like, you might think those things. And then we have a big legacy of oppressive misogynistic views from Freud, who popularized the idea that the clitoris produced an immature orgasm and that the only mature orgasm was created by way of a penis. I'm like, really, who does that benefit? Does that benefit women or men? Let me think about that. And then, so we have all this shame. We also have this history of women's bodies being toxic or shameful as well. So we talked about the wandering uterus. Guess how you treated that? Vaginal steaming. We still see that today. That's absolute pure misogyny being marketed as feminism. The idea that women are dirty, right? As soon as you start your menstrual cycle, for some reason it's not dirty to trip and cut your knee and have blood there, but it is dirty to have menstrual blood. And so this idea that periods are dirty have been used not just by religions to exclude women, but multiple cultures. There are many places where women are excluded from going to the kitchen if they're on their period. They're told they're dirty. This idea that the uterus is filled with toxins, which is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, that's where an embryo implants. If menstrual blood were a toxic swill, why would an embryo implant there? That makes no sense. You don't need to have any kind of medical degree to take that apart, but that explains to you really how sort of deep-seated the misogyny is and, how difficult it is to have these conversations. And even the word pudendum, which we use in medicine to describe the external part of the genitalia, almost always for women, is derived from the Latin pudere, which is to be ashamed, right? So if we're actually building in shame to how we talk about women's bodies, it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that women feel marginalized by medicine, right? That's no surprise. And then we have women's health is globally inadequately studied. Women who have chest pain, who go to the emergency department, are more likely to be dismissed and not worked up for a heart attack, and a man is. I mean, that happened to me when I had sepsis. I was told I was hysterical. I'm like, no, I have low oxygen, which is making me really irritable, which is why I'm yelling at you, because I'm dying and I don't want to die. That's not hysteria. But so it's very easy. Women get dismissed. We have these, up until very recently, women's and children's hospitals, as if sort of women need to be taken care of differently, as if you have a uterus, somehow that means your brain works differently, or your heart works differently, or your lungs work differently, because it doesn't really, not in that sense. We have glass ceilings that really affect how we study things and research things. And so, these glass ceilings that have for many years prevented women from having positions in even obstetrics and gynecology departments are what allow these purity myths to sort of persist. So when I was in medical school, I remember getting a lecture on, yeast infections and, being told to wear white cotton underwear. So, I'm like, I have a question about that. So the vagina's on the inside. If wearing white cotton underwear prevented infections, wouldn't that be better for men because their genitalia is external? And of course, nobody had ever thought of that. And this idea that women's underwear was going to cause mayhem, I'm like, have any of you ever seen a pair of underwear? Have you, how could that possibly, and if wearing white prevented infections, why don't dermatologists tell everybody to dress in white? Doesn't make any sense. If the dye is coming off your clothes onto your skin, you have bigger problems. I'm just saying, you might need to buy your clothes from somewhere else. So, but if no one has ever sort of been in medicine who has worn this underwear, who could feel empowered enough to speak up, you could see how these myths would persist. And unfortunately, many people have a fear of discussing sex and sexuality. And so if you can't talk about sex and sexuality with your doctor, and there's this beautiful, fancy website with gorgeous people, and they're willing to talk about sex, well, of course, you're probably going to go there. I mean, I could see that if no one's willing to have that conversation with me. And sadly, dogma becomes the standard of care. But I think one of the most important things, and this quote speaks to me, this to me really sums up so much of wellness. And this is from Maya Angelou. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you do, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And that's so true. I was treated very poorly when I was in the hospital 16 years ago. I've never forgotten that. I've forgotten the words. I've forgotten the exact things people said. I've never forgotten how it made me feel. And so if medicine is making people feel badly, and if wellness is making people not feel that way, making people feel like they've been listened to, even though it's an illusion, it's an absolute illusion, but it doesn't matter, it's an illusion. If that's how you feel, that's how you feel. If wellness is making people feel that way, then we have to start to figure out how to solve that problem. So, and it's obviously making people feel really good because it's a $4.2 trillion a year industry. And I always say to people, what if we spent $4.2 trillion a year on medicine? What if we had an extra $4.2 trillion a year? How many diseases could we cure? How many people could we give health care to? We could vaccinate the world. I mean, there's so many things we could do with all of that money, right? But it's going to, like charcoal ice cream and turmeric smoothies. And I didn't even know that there's like a wellness real estate business. I guess that's like buying spas and stuff. I don't know. I mean, obviously, I need to sort of look into this more because there's obviously a lot of money to be made. Oh, but then there's ethics, so there's that. And so, wellness is not filling the gaps. They are exploiting them. And it's so fascinating to me that somebody like Gwyneth Paltrow will essentially get a pass from the press because she's using a different language, even though she's actually saying, I can monetize those eyeballs. I mean, that's her quote. That's her quote. She's making money off of people coming to her site, no different than Big Pharma. And yet she's getting a pass and Big Pharma isn't. And I'm always fascinated by that. I mean, I'm no friend of Big Pharma, but at least they do some studies. And I could go to any factory in the United States that's making any drug approved by the FDA and go to the end of the line and have it tested, and it would contain what it's supposed to contain, probably within 1% to 2% of the amount of ingredients, which is probably the margin of error. But you can't do that for anything that's sold on Goop or any of these other websites. They don't have to prove anything. They could be literally selling you a magic carpet. It's okay, it's fine, because that's good for you, that's wellness. So I want to talk a little bit now about the words that are used in wellness, because this is something I'm really quite fixated on right now. So these are very common words that are used. They're pure, wholesome, natural, clean, fresh. Those are all words that we actually associate with very positive things. And these are very interesting words. So looking at it as sort of from a woman's health perspective, if you think that the women's reproductive tract has been labeled as toxic or dirty since the beginning of time, this search for purity, this search for freshness, this search for natural fits in with how women have sort of been enculturated since the beginning of time. But these words are also very interesting from how you construct an argument standpoint, if you sort of look at the practice of rhetoric. And these are what we would call God words. So there's God words and there's devil words. And God words are things that we give a pass to, that we think are sort of universally good, and we all want to sort of be associated with those words. If we hear them in a sentence, we give a pass. A devil word, we don't give a pass to. Nobody wants to be associated with the devil word. So you can think of cool and uncool. You can sort of use whatever terminology you want. That, when people started writing about rhetoric however many years ago, those are the two words they come up with, but good and bad, however you want to think about it. So we all, as a culture, associate, these are all God words. We associate them with things that are positive. So when they're tagged on a product, we're more likely to give that product a pass. Now, I want you to think about that and think about what wellness is offering, and then think about what I have to do every day. So I have to tell people that their vaginas are damaged from radiation, and maybe I'm going to be able to fix that or maybe not. It's the legacy of their cancer. Or that they have a horrible nerve pain condition, and maybe I'm going to be able to help it and maybe I'm going to be able to not. And I know a lot about it. Or maybe they have a horrible muscle condition that's causing pain with sex. Everything that I'm saying, to every single thing that I'm doing as a treatment, I'm using devil words. Cancer, radiation, pain, those are things people don't want to be associated with. So right off the bat, we are giving wellness practitioners globally a pass because of the words that they use. Now think about these words and think about the words I said at the beginning, living your best life. That's a God word. Now think about the World Health Organization definition of wellness. And I know you've all forgotten it because it's so boring. And it's all these devil words. I'm just like, oh, so who wants to be like that? We all want to be sort of associated with these kinds of positive words. And so the branding is fascinating to me. And so this use of these words that give us all a pass is something that we have to really start studying and pointing out to people so they can tell a difference. And many of these words are the same words that are used in religions as well. That's how you get people on board with different things, as you use these kinds of God words. And what's really fascinating to me is that despite this veneer of health, this veneer of goodness, of natural purity, it's the same toxic messaging. I mean, if you look at the douche ads from the 1920s and 30s for Lysol, your vagina is a toxic swill that's ruining your relationship, or womb healing vaginal health. Let's get those toxins out of your uterus. Of course, we know they don't exist. It's the same, exactly the same messaging. The things that are being peddled by wellness today, it's the same snake oil we've been seeing over and over again. It's just now maybe there's more technology, now maybe there's different words to use. Now you can use made-up words like adaptogens or nutraceuticals or whatever you want to use. And because those are always associated with pure, clean, and natural, those become God words as well. So, and of course, like religion, you have to have, religious figures. That's my pal Gwyneth. And, you have to have talismans, like the jade egg, things that are, have supernatural powers. It's really fascinating to me, this sort of overlap with sort of the supernatural and wellness as well. So I like Venn diagrams. That's my jam. I sit at night. I know, isn't this great? And it's fascinating to me. I'm going to do a whole book of Venn diagrams. I'll call them Jen diagrams. So anyway, yeah. And as I was thinking about the overlap of sort of femtech and wellness and everything. That's how this came up. But it's fascinating that, Gwyneth Paltrow largely gets a pass from, the industry or from reporters and things, and Alex Jones largely doesn't, even though they both promote conspiracy theories. I find that really fascinating. And the more I started to think about the similarities between Paltrow and Alex Jones, the more I started to look into how medical conspiracy theories overlap with wellness. And did you know that if you believe in a medical conspiracy theory, that increases your chance that you will buy supplements? That makes no sense at all, right? Like, supplements are 70% of them are adulterated. Like, if you're a medical conspiracy theorist, you should be more afraid of supplements than anything else, because you literally don't actually know what's in them. Like, I'm not going to take them. But if you believe vaccines cause autism, if you are anti-fluoride, if you're an AIDS denialist, if you think Wi-Fi is picking up from the wire in your bra and that's causing breast cancer, and that was like, on Goop. If you think the World Health Organization is trying to clandestinely sterilize women with vaccines, you are more likely to buy things from a wellness site. So wellness is financially invested in conspiracy theories. And then you start to think about, chiropractors and naturopaths and all these other sort of pseudoscientific fields that grossly promote medical conspiracy theories. And the problem is the more you talk about them, the more they stick. Propaganda works. This is called the illusory truth effect. And so we all mistake repetition for accuracy. So if you go on a wellness site to look for those Christmas candles that we talked about earlier, you might see a doctor talk about his keto diet. And you're like, well, I'm keto curious. Let me go check out his website. And he says that you can treat chlamydia with garlic. Oh, really? And, that fluoride can cause, whatever brain injury it's supposed to cause. So you can be contaminated very easily by going on these sites. The surface might seem benign. The surface might be, how to deal with your father's mistress. But deep down inside, they get you the hook. The hook is the conspiracy theories. The hook is getting you to sort of get sucked in by that God language, to believe that that's where you should be, to believe that's where you should be, right? Like, I don't believe anything I do in the office. I know, or I have a hypothesis, and there's a difference. And these beliefs are so hard to undo. So this was a recent piece I wrote for the Times about period syncing, which is the idea that if you have a whole bunch of women together in closed confines, they're all going to start cycling together. Well, so, that's stupid, first of all, if you think about it. Because what would be the evolutionary benefit to have everybody cycling at the same time? That means everybody's going to get pregnant at the same time. And and everybody's going to deliver within the same 3 to 4 week period? And what if there's a drought then? All the babies are going to die. Obviously, evolution is invested in spacing out pregnancies on as many days as possible, because evolution doesn't care if you die or me. Evolution cares that enough live, right? They don't care which individual person. So I wrote this, I quoted all the data, there's great data about it. And, I don't think this is what it is when I lived with 2 women, or I swear it's not a myth. I did read it, but we keep track on old-fashioned paper calendar. And the amount of hate mail I get about writing about things like this is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, who do you think motivated me to write this? Like, big non-period syncing? Just saying, I just, and sometimes you're like, I just don't get it. And so wellness is really the worshiping of false idols. It really is. I got so much hate mail for this from the Times. Oh my God. But I got the best insult. I keep all the insults. I got called the vaginal antichrist. So I had a t-shirt made. So yeah, I'm the motherfucking vaginal antichrist. That's my, that's my thing. So, right? I know that could be like a metal band. Anyway, so then I started thinking, after I went to a Goop conference, about the really whole God overlay. So it's not just God words, it's Frank words. So when I went to the Goop conference, all they did was talk about like mysticism and, your mind can control everything. And then Marianne Williamson ran for, the Democratic nominee, right? And I was like, who is she? And why is she a friend of Oprah? And wait a minute, Gwyneth and Oprah are friends. How is this connection? Oh, Williamson's going to speak at the next Goop event. So I read a couple of Williamson's books, and you don't have to read it. I read them for you. They're horrible. And basically, it's all about God's light, which was never actually really explained. But you need God's light, if you just have God's love. But there's no practical advice how to get God's love. It's just, you just need to have God's love, and good things will happen to you if you do that. And she met Jesus at a party too. And she actually met him. I was like, really? Wow, you are an odd bird. But the central tenet of all of them is this mysticism, which is, again, it's a belief. And so if you think about it from that standpoint, mysticism permeates wellness so much that it really confirms to me that this is really just all a big religion. And that's why it is so hard to sway people. I mean, I gave a talk the other day, and this woman in the audience said, well, what did I think about, why was I so dismissive of organic tampons? Because clearly there are pesticides in, Tampax. I said, well, okay, where's the study that shows that there's pesticides in Tampax? Well, the company, I said, oh, where's the study? Well, okay, there isn't one. There's actually no study showing there's pesticides in tampons. I know the literature. There is no study. Well, the other company says, okay, well, that's great. So they're lying. They're lying to you because what they've done is they've made an assumption and they are marketing a product based off that assumption. Why are you giving that company a pass and you're not giving the people who make Tampax a pass? Again, God words, belief. And I could not get her to understand that there's literally no data that says that there's toxins in tampons at all. There's nothing. There's no data. And, it was such an interesting, she was so willing to believe this company that was clearly profiting from the myth and not believe the facts or not understand or not grasp the facts, because that would obviously change her belief system. She would have to change her belief system in the way that if you, try to explain to somebody that God doesn't exist, you're trying to explain, you're trying to sort of take away their belief system, and people are hesitant for that. So, wellness is more malignant than just wasting money because it leads people to delay diagnoses and go down rabbit holes of misinformation. And it exposes people, as we talked about, to medical conspiracy theories, which are frankly very dangerous. And because these things are fantastical and they spread, people are more likely to believe them than they are the facts. And, the least natural thing is to get your nutrients from supplements. I mean, that just, again, it's fascinating to me. And then there's things like this, like vaginal weightlifting, which is, not really wellness, but I got challenged to a vagina off. So I don't really know what that is, but this woman has 100,000 followers on Instagram, and she has a message out there that you don't need pap smears. So this is what people are doing with their privilege, and this is how bad that religion is. And people follow acolytes, right? So that's the sort of the malignant underbelly of wellness. And so how do we sort of, beat this down? I sort of think about people come to wellness from a lot of different ways. And lack of information is pretty easy to undo if you can get that out there first. And fear and anxiety and vaginal shame, we can actually fix that in medicine as well. But this sort of nature's benevolent or this distrust of the government, that's something we're going to have to figure out how to study, how to fix. And I'm just going to end with one last conspiracy theory here, because this is fascinating. So this is my dog, Hazel, and I took her for a run a few months ago, and I guess she ate some cannabis that somebody had dropped. And, I don't know, like I live in Marin County, California. Cannabis is legal, and, people drop stuff. Anyway, that's her urine tox screen. And I just put it up on Facebook, because I was like, hey, I just wanted people to know who run with their dogs on the well-known running path that I run on, that this could happen. And you know what? If you're out there with your cannabis, pick your stuff up, okay? The number of hateful comments that clearly I had faked this. Clearly this was all some anti-cannabis conspiracy theory, where I'm like, I didn't say don't do it, it's bad for you. I didn't say, ooh, cannabis is horrible. I just said, pick your stuff up so my dog doesn't eat it. That was literally it. And so I left it up there as an experiment. There's something like 30,000 negative comments now that all these people believe that this, like I faked that I spent the time faking that drug screen. I was like, really? And that's because everybody wants to believe that cannabis is good for you. And I'm not saying it is or isn't, but it's just the power of belief and how people get so involved. I'm like, why? I would fake my dog's urine drug screen? Really? You think I have nothing better to do with my time? So this is just kind of a little sort of walk through wellness and how I would like you all to think about it more as a religion and a belief system than anything to do with medicine. And hopefully we can study some better ways down the road so we can lead people to the path of science. Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring that bell to be notified about new videos. You can follow us on social media, and if you really love what we do, consider supporting us with a donation. Links to all that good stuff is in the description below.